I think Illinois, Chicago, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and California, places like that, have been the poster children for how not to do this for a really long time. And if you, I would imagine, I've never attended one, but there is a NASBO meeting. I mean, there are meetings of the state legislatures, pension people. I don't think it's any secret to them that they're all going to try to do whatever they possibly can not to end up in the same boat. In one of the in the same piece recently last month where we wrote about this, um, I mentioned that something like more than half of all high priority 911 calls get no immediate response anymore in places like Chicago. I mean, that is unfortunately a real world potential consequence of having to deal with some of these underfunded plan issues. And I have a lot of sympathy. Here's the irony. The police department in Chicago, which would be tasked to solving some of the crime issues, Chicago's police fund is either the lowest or second lowest funded plan in the entire United States. Right. And it's got something like a 20% asset to liability ratio. I've never seen anything like it. So,
Meaning that it's very unlikely the money is going to be there for the people
well,
who need it.
put it this way. Municipal analysts and people like that typically would describe a plan like that as being effectively insolvent. Now there are things that the state can do and may be politically compelled to do to try to prevent the day of reckoning from coming, and by making ongoing contributions. But how Chicago ended up in this mess, and the same thing for the state of Illinois, is kind of a remarkable Harvard Business School case of what not to do.
How do you think it affects how investment firms or businesses evaluate Illinois and Chicago when they're considering
Well,
all sorts of investment?
yeah, those are complicated decisions, right? Because you need energy. You need access to energy at reasonable prices. So, that's a huge decision these days. You need an educated pool of workers, right? So you can't just migrate something that easily from, let's say, Chicago, Illinois to kind of North Dakota, right? You don't have the people, you don't have the transit systems, you don't have the airports. Um, uh, but when you look at how quickly places like Boise, and Salt Lake and places like that are growing, um, th- there are certainly examples of companies and communities that are moving from one state to another pretty quickly. Um, so Chicago and the state of Illinois do offer certain benefits in terms of energy and educated workforce and mass transit, but the tax burdens are becoming high. And every time I look at it, I mean, the IRS updates this data very slowly with a 3-year lag. Inside JP Morgan, but we use credit card payment, things like that, to track change of address forms. Every time we look at that data, Illinois and Chicago show up, either 1, 2, or 3 on the list of places with the highest levels of out migration. So people either leaving the county to go to another county, or people leaving the state to go to another state. So that's, the worst example of this is, of course, Detroit. Not the state of Michigan, but Detroit. When the auto industry met its doom, at one point the big 3 automakers had 85% market share in the U.S., and as that eventually fell to something in the low 30s, the tax base of Detroit and the population left, and then you ended up with a restructuring. So that's like the most exaggerated example of what happens. But in slow motion, Chicago and Illinois are already losing portions of their tax base.
You can empathize with people who are weighing, seeing that. We've heard stories about people who, are robbed and they call for police and they never show up because of exactly what you pointed out with there's just not enough resources available. The police are kind of having to pick and choose, or they feel like rents are rising faster because property taxes are going up.
As recently as 2019, only 19% of high priority calls went unanswered in the city of Chicago, and now it's more than half. So just in 5 or 6 years, the public safety issues are deteriorating pretty rapidly. And, look, I don't like to judge anything by anecdote. And, so I try and avoid doing that. So that's why we amassed as many big picture statistics as we could. Another one that's notable is the percentage of murders actually cleared by an arrest
Mm-hmm.
or over a decade were only about 20% in Chicago compared to over 50% in New York and a national average of 45%. So, using some discipline around the kind of statistics you look at and doing them over time and across jurisdictions, it's pretty clear that there are some substantial crime issues in Chicago and in the state.